By this point, I think we all know that I'm really into tiny houses in The Sims, but recently I've also gotten really into pink. I realize that's kind of a silly thing to say, like, we get it, Kayla, your room is pink, you've got pink curtains, we know you like pink, but what I mean is that I've been building a lot of pink houses in The Sims recently. I don't know what's gotten into me, but like, I made a pink apartment, I made a pink penthouse, and this time I made a pink tiny house. The era of blue Suburbans is dead, and it's pink cottage time. So my plan here was pretty simple. I basically just wanted to make a tiny pink house, but I wanted it to be a functional tiny home. So I really didn't want to go over 100 tiles, but I tried really hard to keep it under 64 tiles. With the different tiers of tiny homes, you get different perks, and the 64 tile tiny homes have way more perks, like double skill gain and half as much bills and stuff. And we managed to keep it just 64 tiles with a second floor and a porch. Normally when I do these tiny houses, I can't really pull that off. A porch is like a serious waste of tiles with tiny houses, so I try to avoid it usually. But this time I felt like I could fit it and it still seemed like a big enough amount of space. I also built this in the werewolf world. This is in Moonwood Mill, which is kind of different. I feel like I don't usually build cutesy little pink cottages in Moonwood Mill, but I tried it here. I picked this lot specifically because it's 20 by 15, but it's horizontal instead of vertical, and I liked how I could have a side yard this way. I do like this lot and I like this world a lot, but I feel like the lighting is a little bit weird for this one, so I kind of struggled there. I know this might just be a me problem, but I am so picky about the lighting on the lots that I'm building on. I think it just really throws off the whole house when the lighting is kind of weird and it's full of shadows all the time. I guess especially when you're making a video out of a build and you're trying to like record it and have it look pretty for YouTube. But it also just bothers me so much when the lighting is weird. This one's not too bad because at least the sun is shining directly on the front, but some of the worlds have some really weird lighting. I've noticed this one kind of leans a little bit blue, and like Henford on Bagley is very green all the time. That's why I find myself building in Willow Creek or Newcrest a lot, because at least the lighting is even and there's no weird colors, although they do have some weird shadows sometimes. You just can't win. There's so many weird lots in this game. I think the worst of it though is the new high school pack. That world has so much potential, but the lighting is so harsh all the time. It makes me never want to build there. I don't think I've built in that world since the pack came out for that reason, but I'll stop complaining. At least this one is decent, okay? So you can see on the outside, I really struggled with the window selection because I didn't want to just use like the boring base game windows. I know I use them all the time, but it's because there's so many size variants. They just work for a lot of spaces, and in this case, they seem to fit the best. I also tried the Strangerville windows because those are kind of pretty, but I kind of wanted to have like some shutters or some like wider detail on them that we just didn't have. And so I just used the base game ones again. And then with the floor plan, it was kind of easy to do because there's not a lot of space. The hardest part was trying to figure out where to put the ladder because I really wanted to use that upstairs area, but I didn't really know how to fit a ladder in very easily because it is so small. I ended up sticking it right next to the door and it works pretty well there. And then in the back, we've got a really tiny kitchen. We have one very small bathroom, a very small bedroom, and a really, really tiny living space. Of course, I used pink like everywhere on this. These are the kitchen counters from the Country Kitchen Kit. Say that 3 times fast, but they have a really nice pink swatch and it's got some cute yellow accents that I felt like fit really well in here. Despite how small the space is, I still fit a dining table and a full living room, and there's a full bathroom. Sometimes when I make tiny houses, I like choose to omit a sink, for example, in the bathroom because there's just not enough space, but we managed to make it work in here. I also found this really cute swatch of a dining table from Cottage Living that had a really adorable tablecloth on it, and I don't think I've ever used that swatch, at least not in a while. There's so many patterned swatches in The Sims that are really hard to fit into like the everyday build because they're just a little bit too bold sometimes, but because this space is like all one color, we can mix and match in some patterns in a few places. It makes me feel like we should have more tables with tablecloths. I hadn't really thought about it that much, but there's not really many tablecloth tables in The Sims. We have a couple really big ones that've got like super long tablecloths that feel kind of like wedding-y to me, but we don't have a lot of like simple everyday kind of household tablecloths in the game. Oh my gosh. Okay, and the couch situation in here was extremely difficult for me because everything was pink and it's kind of this like blue toned, almost bubblegummy pink with all those base game swatches. It was so hard to pick a couch that fit. There's a lot of pink swatches on the couches, but they're not all like the same shade of pink. They're like too cool or too warm, and they just didn't really fit the way I wanted them to. So I tried a bunch of different options. You'll also notice that I was jumping around a lot with this build. It's so small, but I couldn't just like stick to one room for some reason. I like did half the bathroom, left and picked a couch, went back to the bathroom. So I'm sorry that I'm like moving around so much. Normally I try to do like one room at a time, I guess minus the wallpaper. I do tend to do do that last. You can see I'm doing it last right now. I haven't done it in the living room yet. Took me a while, but I finally settled on a couch and I started adding in some more decor and stuff. There wasn't really a ton of wall space in here. I noticed that I had a lot of windows everywhere or like cabinets on all the walls, so I didn't have a lot of space for art, but I put a couple things. There's a few pink items that I kind of forget that we have. There's that little gallery wall from, I think it's from kids' room stuff, or maybe it's like movie hangout. I'm not really sure, but I never ever use it. It's got like a bunch of pink and yellow roses on it, which fit perfectly for this style of house. That was like the whole color scheme we were going for, so it worked really well. And then above the dining table, I tried to make a couple little floating shelves with some little decor on them. So there's like a little cupcake art print and some bunnies, just a couple books and stuff, just a few little cute things that fit there. Whenever I build tiny houses, I kind of try to fit in as much storage as I can. I know it's The Sims and like it doesn't actually matter and it's all pretend, but I'm always trying to add in like extra shelves and extra drawers and little things here and there, because obviously in real life you're kind of looking for storage everywhere you can. So I try to somewhat implement that in my Sims builds. I think that the art studio was the hardest part though, partially because the roof sucks and I refuse to move it to finish furnishing it. So the roof is like totally clipping through the build the whole time. When you're on Walls cutaway mode, like in game, it's not as obvious and it's not as bad. So in here, I don't know if you can tell, but I kind of tried to hide a bookshelf like behind the ladder up there. I also put a rocking chair, I put some knitting stuff, I put some cross stitch stuff. Basically, I wanted to add in like every single crafty feature we had in the game. I keep calling it an art studio, but it's basically just like a cozy craft room. Also, the bookshelf that's up there in the corner isn't technically accessible, like your Sims can't get to it, but it's more just there for decoration. And then moving downstairs in this primary bedroom, obviously I wanted to use a pink bed, and I feel like that cottage living one is perfect. Like the swatches, the flowers, everything about it is exactly what I wanted. And I tried really hard to fit in as much useful stuff in here as I could. Like I wanted to have a bed, I wanted to have a computer really badly. We can't fit like a full-size desk, but I put a little tiny desk in the corner. We've got a tiny little dresser. I always forget about that base game one. I think it's maybe a little bit too fancy for my average builds, so I don't use it all that often, but it looks really good in here. It also fit on the wall like perfectly. And then I put the bed kind of centered underneath a window. I always kind of go back and forth between wanting to put it in the corner to fit a full nightstand, or between wanting to have it centered in the room like that so you can walk around all the sides, because technically Sims do scoot against the wall now. There's this whole debate about scooting because Sims used to not scoot to the corner of a bed. They did originally, and then it glitched and they didn't, and now they do again. But I think all of us are a little bit wary of putting beds against walls because of the long period where it was bugged. So I kind of try to avoid doing it, even if it does work now. And I also just think the beds look better when they're off the wall. I feel like sometimes when they're up against the wall, it's not as nice looking, depending on the space, obviously, but I just preferred to have it be off the wall in there. And that's the entire interior. It's really not very big. Obviously, it's a tiny house, so it didn't take very long to furnish. On the outside, I tried to add in a lot of flowers, like really pretty flower garden areas. I put a bit of patio furniture. I think the main highlight for me of the entire front yard is the cat mailbox. I will say that's probably the best part of the entire house. I like how it has the little pink ears. It's like kind of a nice little touch of extra pink. I also put a little yellow bike out here. I think there's some gnomes and stuff, just general cutesy decor. This is the kind of house that I want to use for like a single sim just to start off with. It is kind of expensive. Like I don't think it's a starter home. I think it's like 32,000 simoleons. I'm watching the preview really tiny, so I can't read the number, but I do see it's there on the screen. It's just really useful to start off in a tiny home because that way you get all of those perks. The double skill gain is unmatched. It is so overpowered. If you're gonna do a legacy challenge or like a 100 baby challenge, I sincerely cannot recommend enough trying to play in a tiny home. Obviously very hard to do for challenges like that, at least for like extended periods of time, but you can kind of cheat tiny houses a little bit. I'll link a video down below of an 8 sim micro home that I've built because you can technically cheat the micro homes and like add in rooms that the game doesn't class as rooms, because when it counts these tiny homes, it's counting tiles. So it's counting like the patio space as tiles, even though that's not actually like a part of the house really, at least I wouldn't consider it to be. So if you make a room that isn't like counted as a room in game, you can add a full like second floor, for example, and then it's still only 32 tiles as far as the game is concerned. And then you can make money quickly, build your skills quickly, age the kids up fast. You even get double relationship gain in those micro homes, so you can like flirt twice with Jeffrey Landgrab and then you're married basically. I love tiny living. This honestly I think is one of my favorite packs ever for The Sims. I really enjoy it. But that is pretty much the entire house done. It's obviously quite small, so there isn't a lot to show you, but I want to pop back into the game and give you a proper tour of the whole place. So like I mentioned, I built this in Moonwood Mill, the world that came with the werewolves pack, and it's back here on this little 20 by 15 lot. It seems that in my game, somebody has moved into it, but this is what the finished product looks like. One of the werewolves, Lou, lives here apparently, but this is the outside. So in the front, there's a little tiny porch, and we also have this little path that goes into the backyard. In the back, we have a little table, a lot of planter boxes, and also the flower arranging table. Like I had mentioned, I really wanted this house to be very crafty and like have every single craft your Sims can do, including flower arranging, but that's pretty much it on the exterior. There's not really a ton going on. I did really like the pink tree because I never ever use that, so it's kind of a fun place to fit it in. And when you actually go inside, you walk in through this front door. Don't worry, your Sims can still walk through this wreath on the door. They just kind of like glitch through it basically. On the inside, we've got a little entryway. In the entryway, we have a ladder and a door. Not much else. Normally I would put like, I don't know, a shelf or like a coat rack or something, but I prioritized the ladder this time around. We have this little living room area. It's got a tiny couch, a little tiny TV, and a bookshelf. There's also a little dining table with those shelves I was talking about, and the kitchen I think is my favorite part. I'm really glad I managed to fit in like kind of a decent sized kitchen in here. I think this item, this little cookbook item from the Cool Kitchen pack, is one of my favorite little decor pieces. I always kind of forget about it, but it is so cute. And then in here we've got a little tiny bathroom. Again, not a lot going on. There's not really a lot of space. It's only 5 tiles in there. And then to our left we have the bedroom. And in this bedroom I managed to fit a lot of stuff. We have the dresser, we have the computer, we've got some postcards, we have a mirror. So pretty much everything you could need fits in here. And your Sims can walk all the way around the bed still. And then if you go up that ladder, we have that tiny little room I was talking about for all the crafts. I think this is probably my favorite part of the whole house because I make so many builds that have these dormers like this, but usually it's just wasted space, like it's just empty. You can't really afford to waste space like that in a tiny house, so I turned it into this craft room. Your Sims climb up the ladder and then come over to the right like this, and we've got the easel, we have all these painting canvases, we have the rocking chair, we've got cross stitch, we've got knitting. I mean, everything is covered in this little room. And I guess if you wanted to, you could probably switch that into a second bedroom, although I kind of like it being a skill building room. And that is the whole house. Like I said, there's not really a ton to show you because it's so tiny. I really like how it turned out though. I think I might actually play in this one, and I promise I won't make any like really pink houses again, at least for a little while. Tomorrow I'm actually posting a pretty cool apartment video, and I swear it is not pink or blue. It's not a blue Suburban either, I promise. But with that, I'm gonna end this video right here. Thank you so much for watching. Have the best rest of your day, and I'm gonna catch you all tomorrow. Okay, bye everybody. Also, you can't make fun of me for having my Christmas tree up still. I know it's been a few days since Christmas, but I am pre-recording these. It is currently only the 14th, and I am allowed to have it for all of December. That is my opinion, and I'm standing by it.